Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, September the 13th, 2020. It is currently 8:56 a.m. Central Time. I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church. Sorry for the rough start right there. As soon as I went live, I started getting messages on my iPad from different news agencies, which covered up the date and the time, and I had already forgotten that it's Sunday, September the 13th, 2020. Did I say 2012? 2020 at 8:56 a.m. Central Time. So thank you very much for tuning in. It's already been a crazy Sunday. If you heard the last live broadcast, I got here and was confronted with that tragic news report about the deputies in L.A. that were ambushed and shot. Horrible situation. So I did a live broadcast about that. And as soon as I got done reading that news report, I got another notification with another disturbing news headline. I guess what this morning is turning into is I'm just going to sit here and just go from one disturbing news headline to another. This one is very different than the last one. The last one is very tragic on a human level. Obviously, human beings were shot, and then we had human beings act in a horribly evil way and trying to block the entrance to the hospital and all of the things that took place. I don't want to go re-report the last live broadcast. You can go listen to that. But this one is different in a different way because it may give us a glimpse of, well, where the church is headed. I've been talking a lot about this, that because of COVID-19 and because of other factors that are happening, where is the church headed? What is the church going to look like when we get to 2021? And when I say the church, I'm speaking in just a general term, the church at large. American Christianity and churches all across America, what are they going to look like when we get into 2021? Well, we've got a report right here demonstrating that there's a very good chance that churches are going to be, well, let's just say there's going to be there's going to be fewer people sitting in the pews. There's going to be fewer people sitting in the chairs because it seems that church membership is once again on a decline. And part of this, we could talk about the secularization happening within society. Society is moving in a more secular perspective. And because it's moving in a more secular perspective, that's impacting the church. Some people say, well, people are leaving the church because they demonstrated they were never Christians. Some may say this is the falling away that is supposed to happen before Christ returns. There's so many different ways of looking at it. I'm just focused right now, instead of trying to interpret it, more just looking at the fact of it. People are leaving the church, and the numbers seem to be growing of the number of people leaving churches. So what does that mean? Well, what is it going to look like? Well, we'll talk about that. Let's just get to the facts here first, all right? This comes to us from the Christian Post. Facing America's growing secularization, SBC church membership suffers historic single-year drop. So facing America's growing secularization, the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention church membership, suffers historic single-year drop. So it's a historic drop. It's not just a drop, it's a historic drop. Here's some of the information that we have. While the number of churches in the Southern Baptist Convention has increased slightly, which is kind of weird, the number of churches have increased slightly. So there are people out there still starting more churches. The total membership in those churches suffered the largest single-year decline in more than 100 years, according to recent measures from Lifeway Christian Resources. More than 100 years. That's okay. That means this is not just some. Well, it's just a little small drop. No, this is the largest single-year decline in more than 100 years. In the annual church profile prepared by the Publishing and Distribution Division of the Southern Baptist Convention based in Nashville, Tennessee, data showed that the denomination lost, are you ready for this, some 287,000 members. The denomination lost some 287,000 members. The exact number is 287,655. They lost nearly 2% of its adherents from 2018 to 2019. Now, they still have a current membership of over 14 million. So there's still lots of people. But again, I want to make sure you understand, just because they have a membership of over 14 million in that denomination, how many of those people actually show up to church on a given Sunday? Of that 14 million that are on the membership rolls, how many haven't been to church in 6 months? How many haven't been there in a year? How quickly does a church remove someone from its membership rolls? So I would just say on an average Sunday, how many people are actually showing up? And this is just weird. If the numbers are decreasing, then why are you starting more churches? This is a situation where our churches, like-minded churches need to stop competing with one another and try to work together. I'm not saying compromise doctrine. I'm not saying compromise theology. Hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying compromise doctrine and theology to work together. All right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, and in fact, sometimes even when churches supposedly work together, they'll get together for some big, evangelistic outreach, right? Like, let's all come together for an evangelistic outreach. And then what you hope is that a lot of people will show up, a lot of people will make a profession of faith of Christ, and that you'll gain some of those people will come to your church because you're a part of the event. Sometimes that's not even really working together. That's working together sometimes it feels like you're only working together to possibly be able to, harvest some of the potential members that may come from the event. It sometimes seems very fleshly, even though we disguise it as being spiritual. But I'm talking really working together. I'll give you an example. I live here. My church is located here in Ovalo, Texas. Okay, so it's basically in the middle of nowhere. But across the street, even in this little place of nowhere, which basically there's one street in this town of Ovalo, but across the street is a church. Now, I haven't seen anyone at that church now. It feels like for most of 2020. I don't know if they've shut down completely because of COVID. I don't know what's going on with the church. I haven't seen anyone there. I haven't seen a car. No one, not a sign of existence. But if they're still there, they're a Southern Baptist church. Now, we're not a Southern Baptist church. We're an independent church. We're probably very, very different in our theology from them, very different. We probably would have some similarities because we're Baptists, but we're definitely far more in the Reformed camp. And we're probably about as different as night and day. But they're Southern Baptist. If you get back on the highway and drive, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes to Tuscola. I think it's about 5 minutes away. Tuscola is about 5 minutes away from Ovalo. Takes just a couple of minutes to get there. There's a Southern Baptist church in Tuscola. First Baptist Church of Tuscola. Well, that's a Baptist church. All right, both Southern Baptist. Both Southern Baptists, both serving an area. And then if you go from Tuscola to Buffalo Gap, now that takes about 10 minutes or 12 minutes, probably about 12 minutes to get to Buffalo Gap. Well, guess what? There's another Southern Baptist church there. So how many Southern Baptist churches do you need in the same area? Same denomination, so you would have the same beliefs, and at least you would think, right? Now, I know the Southern Baptist churches are autonomous, but the point is they keep making more Southern Baptist churches while membership is declining. Churches are going to have to work together. I mean, they lost 2% of their adherents in 1 year. Over 287,000 people just left. Over 287,000 people just left. There are no more. Where did they go? Well, the number of churches in the denomination increased by 74. So only 74 new churches. Okay, I guess that's fine. But the number of people in the church, the numbers are falling. All right. But even though they've had an increase of 74, it did not reflect an increase in the number of those in the congregation. So more churches, less people. Overall, the number of SBC congregations fell to 51,138 over 2018. Multi-site congregations, however, grew by 505 campuses. So the multi-site congregations grew, right? Where you have a church on one side and then you have another, you put a church somewhere else in town, and it's a multi-site kind of church. How those operate, I still not completely familiar with how those operate, but all right. Those increased. Southern Baptist baptisms also fell by more than 4%. So the baptisms are down. The people are leaving. And here's another idea of just what's happening in This article goes on to say the Southern Baptist Convention is not immune to the increasing secularization among Americans that is seen in more of our children and our neighbors not having interest in coming to Jesus. A study from the Pew Research Center last October noted that only 65% of Americans now identify as a Christian. So now only 65% of Americans now identify as Christians. I think that number will probably be down to 60, maybe 60 or below 60, probably in the next 12 months. And what happens when we get down to less than 50% of Americans? I mean, you could argue that, theoretically, 65% of Americans still identify as Christians. So does that make us a Christian nation? Well, no, I think we're in a post-Christian country completely. But only 65% of Americans now identify as Christians, while those who identify as religiously unaffiliated, a group which includes atheists, agnostics, and people who don't identify with any religion, that number is now up to 26% of the population now they're unaffiliated with any religion. That's an atheist, that's an agnostic. That number is growing. The drop in the number of Americans identifying as Christians reflected a 12% decline when compared to the general population 10 years ago. The decline was visible across multiple demographics, but particularly among young adults. Again, I think the number of those who stop claiming to be Christians, I think that number is going to increase. The percentage is going to increase. And I think we're going to be down to about 60% of Americans claiming to be Christian probably in the next 12 months, definitely within the next 24. All right. And when the next time we get another study, we'll see. So in addition to the decline in membership, giving in the Southern Baptist Convention was also down. And they talked about they fell 1.44%. So that's not a dramatic decrease, but it's still a decrease in giving. Why is that important? Well, churches that don't give, that impacts their ability to minister, that impacts their ability to pay their pastors, that impacts their ability to do lots of things, impacts their ability to pay for their building, other things. So giving is down, membership is down, and the number of people who profess to be Christians, that is down. We have a secularization that is happening around us, and churches are going to have to listen. Make this very clear. Listen, and I don't understand why churches don't realize this. Churches ran around coming up with every theory to supposedly attract the people of the world. Remember, they came up with the seeker-sensitive church movement, the emergent church movement, the purpose-driven church movement. They would go to a town and you would go knock on the doors and you would try to interview all the people, the people who did not go to church, non-church Sally and non-church Harry. You don't go to church. Okay, why don't you go to church? Okay, you don't like this about church. Okay, we're going to create a church for the non-churched. We're going to create a church to get those people who don't like church, and we're going to make the church in a way that they like it. Churches have tried all of those little tricks, and guess what? The number of people attending is decreasing. All of your tricks, all your fun, you can have your big fall festivals, you can have your basically your little circus with your petting zoos and water slides and all the other nonsense that churches do. You've tried all of that, and guess what? The people still left. You played all the games, it didn't work. Because that was never what the church was called to do. The church wasn't called to try to create a place that entertains a lot of lost people. Because no matter how much you entertain them, at some point they're going to grow tired of your entertainment and they can go somewhere else to find entertainment. The way you build a church based off people's faith and commitment to Jesus Christ and their desire to hear the word of God preached and their desire to be equipped for ministry. Not for their desire to find friends and their desire to find quote unquote community. It's got to be a commitment to Jesus Christ and his word. The church basically turned into an entertainment center and people grow weary of your entertainment and they move on to something else. The world is becoming more secular, and the answer is not to try to become to try to downplay the gospel and downplay the Bible. No, the key is we just continue to preach the word of God in season and out of season. We continue to preach doctrine, theology, teach church history, disciple people, equip people. That's what we're called to do. And if people leave, they leave. If they show up, they show up. You can't chase the numbers. Now, I understand you've got to chase the numbers because some pastors have all kinds of pressure on them. If the numbers don't grow, the people will try to find another pastor because they're like, well, we need to grow. We need to do this. We need to do that. And so that pastor faces all of that criticism and ends up out of a job. So, or if the numbers decrease, then they decrease his pay and he can't take care of his family. So I understand pastors' desire to try to, basically it becomes a job, basically becomes a business. And you've got to meet certain metrics in that business or you lose your job. Well, I hate when the church turns into that. Like-minded churches, as the numbers, I think we went through that era of the megachurch, and I know that they're still there, and they're not going away tomorrow. But maybe the era of the megachurch is over. Maybe it's over. Maybe we're going to see people form, hopefully, small but strong and committed congregations, small but committed congregations where people give. So the people are giving, so the church can take care of their pastor, take care of their needs, but the church can then operate and just no longer try to pursue that whole mega church concept. Maybe the whole mega church thing is over. Maybe 2020 is the year that the mega church concept starts dying, and we start moving to a different model. Smaller congregations that are committed, hopefully wiser with the money, less fun, food, and entertainment, and more getting back to true biblical spirituality. I don't know, but it's something definitely to think about. All right, there you go. I just saw that report. I think that report's actually from this summer. I don't know why it showed up today, but it did. So I'm going to report it. I may have talked about it before, but it just carries on with everything happening in our society. And we could. I talked about. I've already done an episode talking about Christianity under siege and all the things. This is just. We have the secularization of society, and that lays siege to the church because the secularization that is happening outside the church comes inside the church, and inside the church has been politically hijacked. And I think. There's so much happening to the church, and I think the political hijacking of the church. Listen, the political hijacking of the church will lead some people to leave. Many people do not want a politicized church. They don't want that. They don't want that in any way, shape, or form. And I think if you come to church and you don't know if you're listening to a sermon or if you're listening to a campaign speech for Trump to be reelected, I think some people are going to like, I didn't come to church to hear a campaign propaganda to get Trump reelected. I came to hear the word of God, and they're going to leave. I've heard people leave churches just for that reason. That it became so politicized that it was, sounded like a Trump campaign speech. Well, that's not the way it should work. So, there could be lots of factors. I think it's secularization. People are just turning away. They're no longer spiritually minded. People are turning their attention to the things of this world, and maybe it will reveal that a whole lot of people that were sitting in the pew were never saved. Possibly. I'm not here. I can't judge that. I just know this. All we can do is preach. The solution is to preach in season and out of season. The church is to operate the same way no matter what happens. That's the thing with the church. You see, in business, if everyone stops buying your product or everyone stops watching your show, you have to try to figure out, well, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? What do we change? What do we change? What do we change? The church's mission is always the same. Open the door, you walk in, you're here to hear the word of God preached. The ordinances, to participate in the ordinances, prayer, worship, preaching, that's it. That's all the church is to do. To come to equip saints, and then you go forth to do the work of ministry. And that doesn't change, whether there's 1,000 people walking through the door or whether there's 6. 6 or 1,000, you still preach, you still teach. Yeah, all pastors want the 1,000 and not the 6. But I guess I would rather have 6 committed people who want to be discipled than 1,000 people who are there for who knows what reasons and are there, and in many cases, just it's all kinds of problems and difficulties. I don't know. A lot to think about. What's happening in your church? We have people listening to us from all over the world. What's going on in your church? Are you seeing a decline? What's happening? What's going on? Let me know. You don't have to give me any names. I don't want gossip and slander. Just what's happening. All right. Email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right. Thank you for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.